Today I'd like to continue our exploration of chapter 5 of the Gospel of Matthew, that section called the sermon, referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is talking in this particular section about the importance of not being angry at others, the importance of reconciling with others. And Jesus makes a point that it's better if you settle with your sister or your brother before they take you to court, because if they take you to court, things could be a lot worse. So work on the settlement first, which, of course, even today is excellent advice. You want to avoid going to court. It's problematic. What will happen? Attorneys' fees, all of this. Let's avoid the court system. And so there are many systems today of arbitration, of settlement, and that's the path that Jesus, of course, was recommending. And he says, if you don't, you could wind up in prison. And you might ask yourself, well, what was prison like in those days? Was it similar to our experience of prison today? Prison was really the fate of an unrepentant sinner. So if somebody did not confess their sin and repent of their sin, and they were found to do something wrong, prison could very likely be the outcome of that encounter. Prison, however, wasn't, as it is in our system today, long-term. Prison was much shorter. You were either executed, and then, of course, was very short. And, of course, there was no, appeals and all that process. You found guilty. It was a capital crime. You were executed. That was it. Another option could be that you were deported. So you were sent out of the country. You came in as an alien, and you did something that was not good. You stole a large amount, you harmed somebody, that type of situation. Well, you were deported. Another option, you could be sold into slavery. So if you committed a crime, rather serious crime, that would be another option. So prison wasn't, as we know today, where you're there for multiple years, a very short term, and so really a different experience. One has to remember, when reflecting on Jesus' teaching about anger and the avoidance of anger and trying to settle things and all of that, Jesus here is not talking about what we would consider to be a righteous anger. There are some situations where anger is very appropriate. And those situations would be primarily for Jesus in his teaching, where you are working against an injustice. So you see something that's happening, you see that it's wrong, people are being exploited, people are being hurt, people are not being treated fairly. What should you do? You should get angry. And you should work to eliminate that injustice. So there are situations where anger is perfectly appropriate, called for, and even very necessary. Jesus then goes into another subject in the Sermon on the Mount. That's one of the great things about the Sermon on the Mount is, my goodness, Jesus explores so many different aspects of the human situation. The next one Jesus gets into is adultery. And Jesus is teaching about adultery. He talks about looking at a woman with lust. This was, of course, the famous quote that Jimmy Carter, who was running for president, got into a little trouble. He confessed to this, and people kind of made fun of him, and he said, it's something I have to work on. I shouldn't be doing this. Jesus said, not a good thing to do. You might say, some people would, well, you're only looking at a woman. What's the harm of looking? Certainly there's no harm in looking. There's certainly no harm in admiring beauty. But it's looking with lust. And that's sometimes left out of the equation, where this teaching is made fun of and mocked. Well, come on, everybody can just look. Because what happens then is that you can commit what we call adultery in the heart. You can have this desire for somebody, and the desire can lead to an action. So, looking, admiring, that's fine. But there's a line that one crosses when one gets involved with lust. And that is, we're just thinking of satisfying our own needs, our own wants, our own desires. We're not really even thinking about the person that we're admiring as a beautiful woman, a handsome man, whatever the situation is. We're not thinking about that. We're thinking about ourselves and how we can satisfy our own needs. And there is no care or concern for the other. We speak of treating the other as an object. Martin Buber puts it in terms of an I-thou relationship and an I-it relationship. In an I-thou relationship, it's interpersonal. There is dialogue, conversation. There's a mutuality. I-it relationship, all of that is taken out of play. And we're just looking at the person completely as an object. In the book of Exodus, in the Torah, chapter 20, verses 17, the law specifically forbids being covetous. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. And what is covetousness? When you covet something, it's just your desire for that. And the desire then can overwhelm all other considerations. I want that, I need that. We can kind of convince ourselves. And we become driven for that particular object or that particular person. And so covetousness is something that the law discourages. It says, not a good thing. It is not going to help one. We get into, of course, jealousy, envy over a person's possessions, over the person's wife or relationship. And that can lead, of course, to many difficulties for ourselves personally. To show how firm Jesus is with this, and how much he's trying to point us into another direction, Jesus uses kind of a hyperbolic expression. He talks about if it's, your right eye that is causing you this problem with your lustful looking. Well, throw out your right eye. If it's your right hand that is causing, cut off your right hand. Now, Jesus, of course, is not encouraging self-mutilation here. He's just saying you've got to be careful in terms of your desires, in terms of your lust. You have to kind of rein that in because it can lead to harmful things within yourself as a person. So this is something that you want to avoid. And Jesus is saying there's another path, there's another way. There's the way of love and care for all. And Jesus uses this expression, it's better for you to lose one of your members, the eye, the hand, than to have your whole body go into Gehenna. So losing one of those members is difficult, as we all know. One would never want to do that. But think of the idea of Gehenna. Think of burning eternally, in this terrible place, this Gehenna place. Similar, of course, to our notion of hell, this extreme absence of God. But Jesus is saying that this is so important. This idea of controlling our desires, controlling our lust, controlling our covetousness. This is so important and significant that you must think of the consequences. And literally, we sometimes think of this in terms of the afterlife, but we all know many situations where people get into these types of relationships which are based on lust and covetousness, they are literally themselves in a hell type of situation, in a Gehenna type of situation, right here and right now, where they will say quite honestly, I've ruined my family, I've ruined my life. It's terrible. Why did I do that? And so Jesus is encouraging us to go in another direction, to take another path.